Hello and welcome to Digital Transformation for Humans with your host, Amy. In this podcast, we delve into how technology intersects with leadership, innovation, and most importantly, the human spirit. Each episode features visionary leaders who understand that at the heart of success is the human touch, nurturing a winning mindset, fostering emotional intelligence, and building resilient teams. Today, we are going to take a closer look at the corporate world versus startups and talk about shared path to successful leadership. Roland Williams, an American in Stockholm, Sweden, is our fantastic guest. Welcome, Roland. It's great to have you in the studio.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Let's start the conversation and transform not just our technologies, but our ways of thinking and leading. And if you are interested in connecting or collaborating, find more information in the description. Subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes. Roland, I'm really happy to have you here today so that you can share your experience and your global path with our listeners and viewers. Let's start with your journey and sharing what you've been through professionally and what kind of stories you created in the big corporate world and as a business owner.
Sure. Well, it's nice to be here with you. I have a background in communications. I started out actually as a designer at IBM many years ago, and then went on to Coca-Cola, where I worked with a number of different communications related projects and assignments, and was able to meet. I would say it was my first introduction to entrepreneurship, although I didn't really know it or have the vocabulary for that, but was able to work with corporate communications and so many wonderful people. That experience at Coca-Cola is kind of what brought me to Sweden, in the sense that I was recruited to work for a big PR firm, a European-based PR firm, and moved. So I literally relocated from Atlanta at headquarters of Coca-Cola and moved to Sweden and to work for this firm. And we, among other things, did the merger between Astra and Zeneca, which was a monumental project, as you can imagine, and worked on quite a few other things to introduce internet banking in Sweden and all kinds of good stuff. But it's been a really, really wonderful ride, and I love learning. I don't believe in winning or losing. I believe you win or learn. And my goal is to just continue learning, especially now with all of this talk we've had. You and I have spoken at length about AI and the incredible things that are happening with AI. But I believe that now the challenge will be for us to navigate our infrastructure around AI. So there's so much that I could say about all that, but it's been a fantastic ride. And I really believe in you win or learn in life, right? You don't win or lose, you win or learn. So a couple of years ago, I actually had a chance to do something I never thought I would do, and that is write a book. And I wrote a book with Brigitte Schauner and Albert Bengtsson. So we were a writing trio, and the book is called The Principles of Intrapreneurial Capital. And in the book, we basically talk about there are two systems at play here. In most organizations, you have a stable system where the ongoing business is where you have budgets and you have, your management, and a changing system where you have entrepreneurs and you have entrepreneurs outside of the company even. And what happens there in the changing system in complexity, and what can be done, in other words, to get these two systems to coexist, really. And that's kind of what the book is about. And we developed characters and whatnot. There's a story. And then at the end of the book, we actually have pretty much, I would say, a very good white paper about the model that Brigitte and Albert came up with. So there's a 4 quadrants or a model there that you can look at. But the process of exploring something from the outside world and bringing it in to a company is what we basically talk about in the book. And that's something that happy to share with you and your listeners.
Amazing. I have seen that framework and I think it is really valuable, really impressive, and I could recommend it to everybody who is listening or watching us today. And just to add up some context to that, how can leaders ensure that their digital innovation initiatives are closely aligned with their overall business strategy to drive that sustainable growth? What are your experiences and recommendations around that?
Well, they've got to get management teams, on board with these transformations. The thing is, this is a very delicate business, right? You can imagine we're talking about a lot of risks, and I think in our previous chat we talked a little bit about the importance of taking those intelligent risks. We also talked a little bit about having the methodologies and even I would call it the mechanisms in place in an organization for these things to happen. So it's really about handling uncertainty and randomness. That's kind of the gist of the whole thing. So effective alignment also, I would say, includes leveraging this intrapreneurial capital by supporting the employees or the entrepreneurs, the employees who thrive in complexity. Steve Jobs is a great example of that, perhaps maybe arguably the most famous entrepreneur, and increasing the collaboration between the two. It's networking and the collaboration, all the things that happen there. How can you decrease the conflicts and foster some sort of a mutual understanding around the transformative business development? In a nutshell, that's what it's all about.
Steve Jobs is absolutely that figure in history which creates a lot of discussions, and absolutely it is somebody to admire in many senses. And when I think about him and his stories and his achievements, I'm thinking oftentimes about the mindset and the importance of a growth mindset in leadership overall. So what are the practical steps leaders can take to foster that type of mindset within their organizations? And how do you think?
Well, I mean, what we talk about in the book is really for leaders to establish some sort of a cross-functional collaboration. We talk about ambidextrous leadership, and I should mention that Dr. Annika Staber is probably one of the world's most foremost authorities on the subject. She's done a lot of research on that and has written books about it. But ambidextrous, both sides, ambidextrous leadership, being able to navigate in the stable system and the changing system. It's quite a challenge. It's a delicate issue because you've got sort of internal politics and bonus systems and structures in place on one side of things. You've got two different worldviews, you could say. People who maybe have gone to business school and studied all that and have those kind of networks and play golf, and there are all kinds of stereotypes, of course. You have on the other side the changing system. People like me who you might see at a rave breakfast at Norwin at one of these, scale-up, startup, venture cap, companies or something, and networking and going to the SIME conference or South by Southwest, and meeting folks and having lunch. I mean, that's happening in the changing system, and both of those worldviews, both of those things are necessary. And that's the thing. Having this growth mindset means understanding that there's more even outside of my bubble. I need to listen. I think maybe jazz is, quite frankly, the best example of this. And I say jazz, it's also a controversial term because really great musicians don't have labels like jazz or like fusion or like rock or blues or whatever. They just play music. And I consider myself one of those people. So, but for the sake of our listeners, I'll say that in that context, someone who's able to understand and to hear, listen, tap into, and maybe sometimes not even play. Miles Davis would say, you lay out sometimes, just lay out. Doesn't mean that everybody needs to play. But to be able to listen and be able to have your instrument and to listen. And if we do this in a business context, I think that we will begin to see so many more wonderful things that will happen. So creating these, the short story is creating these supportive systems, if you will, these supportive systems that encourage cross-functional collaborations. That's really what's needed now.
Cross-functional collaborations are invaluable, and the ability, almost the talent to listen and hear and react and take action needed. It is something we need today and tomorrow, and it is also unfortunately something what is missing. And I saw it from my experience. When collaboration and communication are taken seriously, the results are amazing.
Yeah.
And in today's fast-paced business environment, resilience and adaptability are also crucial. What are the techniques leaders can use to cultivate these traits within their teams? You've been working a lot with this type of questions. So what are your golden nuggets to share here?
Wow. Yeah. So you want to see what's behind the curtain, so to speak, right? From a magician.
Of course. More value to people.
Well, I mean, there are some great things out there. I mean, there's business model canvas, I think, is brilliant. I actually saw Alexander Osterwalder present that a few years ago at From Business to Buttons here in Stockholm, and he was phenomenal. I think something like that kind of frames the value proposition and the other areas of a business model that quickly get everybody on board, on the same page of music, if you will. And now, what can we do with this? What can we do to maybe enhance our cost structure or whatever else, our partner strategy or whatever it is? That is brilliant. So I've used the business model canvas extensively. Design sprints are also great. I've done a number of them and facilitated those workshops. And oftentimes, and this may be, I don't know if everybody's doing this, but I like to, from the very beginning, I like to, even if I'm in the room with a team of people, I would encourage everyone to go into Miro or something like that, and for us to do all of our sticky notes, all of our ideas, all of our crazy eights in a design sprint. I do them right there online because it actually saves an enormous amount of time trying to sort through thousands of sticky notes or whatever if you had them on a real whiteboard. I think those physical exercises are, of course, great and can be very fruitful. But if you do what I call phygital, right? Physical, digital. If you do the phygital version of this, then it can save a lot of time. And I think to be honest and to be transparent about time is important. At least it is in my life. So I would encourage that if you're going to facilitate a workshop like that and get those insights and bring them to the surface, go ahead and be real about it. Save time, get a Miro, do something like, even now we've got all kinds of AI and whatnot. You can do other iterations and stuff. I mean, Adobe has a bunch of tools. It's just the sky's the limit. But get in there and do those iterations. So I like to use those. We have, of course, the 4C model that Birgitte and Albert, my writing collaborators, they came up with this model. And I think it really, really adds context and helps to establish very quickly, actually, the benefits of both what happens in the changing system and what happens in the stable system. And can kind of, in a way, if you will, squash some of the conflicts that are hindering those transmissions, I would say, is, going from one context to the next. So it's very important to go ahead and establish those right away. And let's deal with them. It could be through a role-playing exercise or whatever. But I think most of the time when we do those workshops, companies love it. Leaders love that because let's get it out in the open. I'll also mention there's a new tool, a Swedish company, but the name of the company is Canucci, Canucci, and they developed something called collective discovery, which I think is really brilliant. And it uses AI, and you're able to basically harvest a collective knowledge from the employees who go in, and it's all anonymous, but you basically harvest that, get their input, and they're open-ended questions, which is pretty amazing. So imagine all of the intelligence that you can gather for a management team, a board, to understand do a temperature reading, what the company actually feels about certain things. They can actually do that. So that's the kind of stuff I think we'll be seeing more of very soon. Yeah.
Amazing. The collective intelligence is something what can create an absolutely different level of decision making within the company and on the personal level as well, actually. And it is a fantastic enabler for leaders who are going through challenging times today when there is not enough information and all this contingency planning and all the restrictions of VUCA world and high pressure. Of course, it is valuable for them. And as you mentioned, the time restrictions, they are also important, and time is something super valuable, and that's exactly something what is very different between the corporate world and the startups, because time is much more valued in the startup environment, and that's something we can remind ourselves about in the corporate world as well. And that is already around the mindset. And I wanted to ask you what personal experiences other than this you would like to share with us where a shift in mindset led to significant breakthrough in your own personal experience or in the experience of yourself within a bigger organization.
Well, I've told this story about working at Coca-Cola. Actually, when I first joined the company, I had a wonderful manager who put me in certain situations that were, I have to now, looking back in retrospect, very uncomfortable. But he really believed in me. And I get emotional thinking about it, but he basically said, we have senior, folks over in the tower, the managers, the executives there or whatever, and they need presentations to be done. Can you go over and work with corporate communications, work with the speech writers and whatnot, and visualize them and bring them back over into our communications. This was the corporate division, so we were the creative arm for corporate, you could say. And so I worked on that team. Anyway, so I'm this young, budding, project manager. I've worked with design and video and whatnot. But anyway, so I go over to the tower and I'm meeting with the speech writers, and we kind of hit it off, and they're really, really a lot of fun, and they're very, very bright, some former journalists and whatnot, really, really world-class, writers and copywriters and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so finally I get invited to visualize the presentation for the CEO of the Coca-Cola company, and which is a big thing, and I'm really nervous. And they tell me to be in the auditorium on so-and-so day, let's say, be there on Thursday, and Doug Ivester, he's going to walk through and check things out in the morning. It's a real early morning. And so Sam and Joe, who are technicians, they set up the auditorium and had the air conditioning, cranked up, and the screens that our design team had done were on, everything is set up. And we get there, and then Paul Pendergrass and the rest of the team from corporate communications, they show up, and I see them in the auditorium at the very top of the stairs. And Paul comes down and he says, "What's going on? Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a little nervous." He says, "Well, take it easy. He's good at what he does. He's the CEO." And then Paul says, "And you're good at what you do." And that was it. So just when he comes down, answer his questions. So I said, okay. And I was still nervous. But then Doug Ivester comes downstairs, and he had a terrible bedside manner. It didn't really, it wasn't the kind of person that, shakes hands and kisses babies. That wasn't his thing. That's okay. He was great at what he did. So he comes down to the very front of the auditorium where the stage is, and he looks up at the screen and he says, "So what's this?" And I said, "Well, it's congruent with what's in the annual report, and our design team did so-and-so, and that's why it looks like this, and then we're going to go to so-and-so." And I explained, and I stopped, but told the story. I'm telling this story because as soon as he saw it, he looked and he said, "Okay," and he walked out. And then Paul came down again and he said, "Well, so what do you say? What do you say?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, great. The fact is, that was a breakthrough for me. In my mindset, I literally understood, I started to understand at least, wait a minute, I don't do what he does, but I'm good at what I do. Just answer the question." Now, fast forward to a few weeks or a month later, I was invited again. This time it was for some video, sort of opening for one of his keynote things that he did for the key accounts or something. And I get invited to one of the other rooms, and everybody's in there. And of course, everybody was always afraid. This is like literally one of the most, powerful CEOs in the world. And so people, I have to say, a lot of folks would tiptoe around this person. I was like, well, what's going on? So I opened the conference room door, and he says, Doug Ivester, he literally says, "Hey, we have this video. I want to do a commercial in the beginning of my keynote. Can you make me a commercial, like a couple of minutes, show some stuff?" And I said, "Well, yes, but you can only have, 30 seconds or so. We're not going to make it in time for your keynote. There's no time to be rendering." I knew that you had to render this stuff. You had to design it, render it, test it. I mean, it was a nightmare, especially back then. Render it to the ACOM and carry on. It would take forever. So I'm thinking, to manage the project I have to be real with this person. I don't care who he is. You can have 30 seconds, you can have 40 seconds, but you can't have 2 minutes, I said. And I was quiet. And I think everybody else, so there was, people lost their breath in the room. What? He said, but he said, okay. And after that, I did dozens and dozens of projects with him because he understood that I would be straight with him. And I understood, well, this is what I do. I answer the question. And we had a great rapport. So I think that's probably the best example I can give you of something very personal to me of having a change in mindset that I believe has taken me to this place I am today. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this, Roland. It's so insightful and so inspiring because I'm sure everybody had such a moment of truth in life where it was the right time to understand that what we do is what we have to stand for, and dare taking those steps and be present and speak up our truth and have the courage of proceeding with our talents as well. Because if you don't dare showing up, if you don't dare speaking up, if you don't dare taking action, then of course it is really close to impossible to share your talents and be a part of your purpose and reflect it into the world. So
Wow.
I loved what you shared. And I'm just thinking, with the rapid advancement of digital technologies, uh, some impactful leadership tips would be really good to hear from you. How do you ensure that leaders can effectively guide their organizations through digital transformation, that they can effectively communicate, that they can create that expansion in business they are there to create?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of depends on who you're asking, right? Some people say consider the source.
Of
um,
course.
uh, you know, what's happening now today? I'll put it like this: with AI and all the rest of the good stuff that's happening there, uh, from a technical standpoint, there are some fantastic things happening to gather insights and to boost productivity and all kinds of stuff. Yes, check. We also have uh, fear. We're struggling with, uh, again, these old paradigms from the stable system saying we're being measured a certain way. We are basically telling a lot of organizations that we need to focus on the short-term revenues and et cetera, quarterly reports and everything. And that is also important, of course. I don't want to discount any of that. However, all of this is about context. I'll get back to the context. I think if we just tether everything to context, helping the leaders to have context about these shifts in business, right? What's happening from the digital world and what's happening within their organizations from future skills gap and all kinds of, reskilling, upskilling, the competence, all of that. Extremely big movements happening. It's like plate tectonics, right? These shifts are happening underneath the surface, and they are going to affect our business, our schools, our our hospitals, our infrastructure, our communications, our transportation. The list just goes on and on. So, with that said, and I guess it sounds like the weight of the world is on our business leaders, right? It sounds like it. Maybe it is to a certain degree. The one thing that we have that's a little different is that we have now a little bit more context about what is happening, and we have a little bit more context about what we should be doing for a better world, for sustainability, for diversity, for inclusion, for accessibility. We understand what we really need to be doing. The question is, how do we do it? How do we make these things happen? And we have the ability to do that now. So now we have all of the, shall we say, tools. I'll use the term tools. We have the tools to drill down, to orbit and drill down into these enormous things that we should be doing and we should be following, and that should be pulling us in the right direction. And we need to motivate why we should do this for the right reasons, and to be able to communicate that. And then back to, that's my role with communications, right? And helping to be real, be genuine, be authentic with the communications, open up. So business leaders who are able to open up and listen. I know a few business leaders even here in Sweden who attend, innovation conferences and fly here and there, or on some panel or whatever. And I've had a chance to meet them and to talk about some of these things. And some of them are very, very interested. They're hungry. They listen. And I would encourage them to maybe be a little bit more outspoken and share a little bit more of that. It's not, I don't mean that they need to be on social media babbling all the time, but to meet, some of these business leaders, I think it provides a little bit more inspiration, a little bit more hope for the rest of us out there, that these things are they are happening. And when you have a certain amount of influence, I feel like, I've had my 15 minutes of fame, so it's time for someone else. So I'm, on a few committees or whatever, and help out when I can with the students, whatever I can do. But we all need to do that. So the business leaders today, get engaged, listen, keep your ear to the ground, and be open to change. Invest in it as well. That's another thing that we don't talk enough about. If you have a good idea for something, if I have a good idea, we met the folks from the innovative team from Volvo a couple months ago. Now, wonderful people. Now, the only way for them to get things done and to explore is to create a business case and to make it very, very clear about the benefits and about where things could maybe be improved or may not be 100% there, but let's see what we can do. They have to have a business case. They have to have the numbers right. They have to have the budgets, the profitability, the margins. They have to have all that and be able to communicate that in the way that management will understand, right? It can't just be, hey, this could be a good idea, not good enough. So we all need to kind of meet in the middle. We all need to work on that and just use communications. We're all people. Now we have a lot more tools, available. So let's tap into those, use them, and let's go. Let's do it.
Let's create this magic. I totally agree. And looking ahead, what do you believe are the most important soft skills? You already mentioned a few of them, but what are those soft skills that leaders and professionals need to develop to succeed in the future? How important is emotional intelligence in this context? How important it is with everything what is outside of that roadmap, everything what is not so hard, but so critical in those business aspects.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, emotional intelligence is extremely important. I do workshops, branding workshops, and talk about EQ, brand EQ, oftentimes, and that is something that I think if the business leaders understand the soft stuff, as we talked about with VUCA and the other concepts there, handling things in the stable system and the changing system, navigating complexity. It requires more than just getting behind the wheel and driving the car this way, so to speak, right? We're going to need to, using the car analogy, if we say the leader is driving, so to speak, then we look around, we're going to need to have a 360 view all the time of what's happening. And maybe even, I wouldn't say exchange the seats, but I will say understand the viewpoint of each person in the car. There are different roles. There are different, I like to use the term superpowers. There are different superpowers, right? And if we look at our teams, look at our organizations like the Avengers do, right? Why don't we see ourselves more like the Avengers sometimes? It may sound a little silly. Sometimes I do this in a design workshop or a business model canvas or whatever, and I'll do the check-in and ask everyone to pick their favorite superhero. And it may sound a little silly, but in fact, if you can sort of relate to some kind of superhero for whatever reason, it might actually mean that, okay, wow, yeah, I see. So that's their superpower. This is my super. It might actually bring context to us as people in our roles at work, as individuals, and maybe even break down some of the fear, the trepidation, the apprehension to collaborate. So collaboration at the core of all of this. Collaboration, I believe, is the central nervous system. I don't know any other better way to put it. For us to be able to adapt, for us to become more resilient, and for us to navigate this complex world. I hope that helps. I don't know.
This is amazing. To wrap up today's conversation, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom, Roland. I love that today we could put together corporate world and startups and highlight all those critical aspects and what really matters to help leaders prioritize what they should develop and how they should move forward in a successful way. I really appreciate your presence here today, and thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Digital Transformation for Humans. I am Amy, and it was enriching to share this time with you. Remember, the core of any transformation lies in our human nature, how we think, feel, and connect with others. It is about enhancing our emotional intelligence, embracing a winning mindset, and leading with empathy and insight. Subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes where we uncover the latest trends in digital business and explore the human side of things. Until next time, keep nurturing your mind, fostering your connections, and leading with heart.